Hello, this is Elijah, and welcome to my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters. Today I have a very special guest, Dorothea Forrester. Dorothea is a writer, director, actor, and photographer, and she's also my daughter. Dorothea won Best Young Filmmaker at the Cannes World Film Festival for her first short film, Blue, receiving praise from cult literary figure Laura Albert and many, many more. She's been collaborating with upcoming band Die Twice, who have been played on Radio 1, taking their live photos and creating a brilliant black and white music video for their single Paris, which she directed, produced and shot in Paris. She's now moving towards working on longer form projects and has a beautiful new film she's creating this year called Pomegranate Seeds. I'll be talking to Dorothea about her life as an artist, how music impacts her, and I'd also like to point you in the direction of her Indiegogo account to help her raise money to fund her new film Pomegranate Seeds. She's working with a brilliant set of young filmmakers, and it's important to help these new filmmakers and artists on their way. So if you could check out her Indiegogo account, Dorothea Forrester, you can help donate. More details will be at the end, and we'll talk to Dorothea about Pomegranate Seeds and more. So please enjoy this conversation between daughter and dad, and also filmmaker, writer, photographer and actor Dorothea Forrester. Thank you for listening. Joining me today on the Songwriting for Songwriting podcast is Dorothea Forrester. Dorothea, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm good. Now, I would describe you as a writer, photographer, and filmmaker, but I always use the word artist to describe someone who's committed to being an artist. And that word for me is a word which covers all different types of art forms. So with that idea in mind, as I said, I'd describe you as a writer, photographer, and filmmaker. Is that how you'd see yourself?
Yeah, I've realized I've kind of curated a lengthy list of different things, which is quite fun. But yeah, I would say photographer, filmmaker, writer, occasionally acting, bit of drawing, bit of everything. So I guess artist is a good umbrella term.
Yeah. Was there like a moment when you decided to commit to being an artist? Was there like a kind of a moment where you decided like, yeah, I'm going to do this? Or was it like more of a gradual kind of decision which kind of came to you?
I think I've never really expected anything different, I guess. I think I've thought about it recently in a way that I guess my parents, you're my parent, so you're both musicians and artists, so in a way it's kind of like the business that I was raised with, so then I view it as the business that I'll go into, kind of like if a family had a shop, I suppose, that I might be considering going into running that kind of industry. It's kind of always been around, so it's something that I've grown into, I think, in a way.
I like that idea of like, if you know, if someone had a butcher, the family business, or like that's a good way to think about it. Was that but growing up with, like, this is a question I've always wanted to ask, actually, like growing up in that kind of environment, like you get it sometimes with, like, say someone is a butcher, they don't want to be a butcher, they rebel against it, or growing up in a creative household, was that something which kind of did you ever want to like do something different? And further to that, is it helpful to be an artist growing up in that environment, or is there a kind of pressure to that too as a creator?
I think it's a very harsh reality check.
Okay.
There was definitely a stage when I was maybe 15 or 16 where I was thinking, this is going to be too tough. I'm out of it. Let's not do this. Just because I've seen the reality of what it takes to actually bring something to life and to make something work, and how much hard work it does take, and how it's not just this kind of dream idea, and it's tough, and it's been very much just shown to me that way, and in a very honest manner. So it's kind of bittersweet. I haven't been able to walk into it with this super hopeful dream state mindset about it. In a way, it's been very kind of, this is what you're doing, so roll your sleeves up and dig in.
Yeah. But I guess within that, though, like, I mean, your work, from what I've read and from your first film, Blue, there is a real sense to like a dream landscape, a kind of daydreaming aspect to that. So whilst definitely you came into, the world into a creative, loving kind of household and stuff, that which is the reality of which is like you need to roll your sleeves up. As an artist and creator, your stuff is daydreaming, isn't it? And so I guess there's that harsh reality, but also your work definitely is very beautiful and romantic and nostalgic and melancholic. So I mean,
Yeah.
your voice as an artist is very, it's not jaded.
No, no, not at all. I mean, I as well as it being a kind of honest insight into the life of being an artist, it's also having two artist parents as well, which is two sensitive people.
Yeah,
So I guess that makes the way that my mind works it's sensitive as well, I guess, and also being exposed to so much art and in all different forms and stuff. It has definitely given me a great education as well. And yeah, I mean, the good thing about having artist parents is that it's not, any emotion can be felt. It's not restricted. There's
yeah.
nothing restrictive, or there's no kind of you must do this, you must do that. It's allowed me to be free with my mind, I guess, in that way.
That's great to hear. I mean, also, I mean, to be fair to you as well, I mean, like, you're not only, we'll come to all this in a second, but like in your first film, Blue, and in the film that you're about to make, Pomegranate Seeds, you're not only writing a film, but you're writing, acting, and directing. So, like, you obviously have a very, you're a grafter, and you're not afraid of kind of making a big move like that, because that's a big move, isn't it? Doing all three, like one is quite a thing to do, acting, writing,
Mm-hmm.
directing. But you're deciding to do all three. So tell us like about that decision to kind of really own it in that way.
Um, I mean, I definitely think with the writing and directing, I feel quite passionately about the fact that if you've written a script, that it's your idea and that you are potentially the best person to bring it to life, especially when it's something that's personal,
Yeah,
which is the way that I write anyway.
yeah.
And I think with the acting thing right now, I'm just very curious, and I've done little bits of it throughout my life, and I'm just curious to see how I am at it, how I am at it now. So
Yeah,
in a way, I'm doing the acting part because I'm curious, and it's kind of a little challenge for myself.
that's great. I love that.
But it's kind of, I mean, it could be viewed as a slightly overly controlling mindset, which I might be prone to. Um,
That's
but
a good
I
thing.
mean, a challenge is always accepted.
Yeah, that's a good thing, I think. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to have control of your work. And also, like as Bowie said, like he gave this analogy of that if you're creating, when you go and swim in the sea and you keep walking and you get to the point where like the water's like just below your chin or just slightly above your chin. He was saying that the best work is created when you're kind of like at that point where like you may have gone in a bit too far, but it's that point where like a real magic starts to happen. So I think that's a
Mm.
thing to challenge yourself like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And yeah, it definitely pushes you to. You have to be hyper focused and hyper on it, and yeah, I'm kind of excited to see how it turns out because it's also slightly a bit of a mystery to me too, in a way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you've got your first short film, Blue,
Yes.
won the Cannes World Film Festival Young Filmmaker Award, and you did write, act, and direct that too. So, that although that was a different time in your life, you've done this before on a smaller scale, haven't you? So,
Yeah, yeah.
and how did it feel? How did it feel? I mean, that really did get a lot of love, that film, Blue. So, like, you've that's a while ago now, and I'd like you to kind of tell us from where you've gone from releasing that film to the moment you're at now, which is when you're about to start work on your first sort of bigger film. Tell us about the creative journey you've been on and what you've been doing.
Mm, I have been, in all honesty, dipping my toes in different creative worlds. I've been focusing on photography and also writing it. Writing Pomegranate Seeds has taken me a fair amount of time.
Yeah,
Um, I think because the subject matter is one that's personal to me,
yeah,
that it had to be given the space and time to breathe and for me to reflect on what I'm saying and for it to not be rushed. I started working on the script for this in 2023, in the spring, when I was traveling in Spain and Portugal with some friends, and kind of just reflecting on relationships of the past and present and where they were headed, and just lots of thoughts about growing up. And I kind of started structuring it then. But I definitely took my time with it, which at times felt wrong, and that I should be more hurried and getting on it.
Mm.
Especially in this world, I think it feels, you have a pressure to move fast with art, because someone else is moving faster than you, or putting stuff out quicker than you are, and
Yeah,
there's a you got to jump on the train.
yeah,
But looking back, I'm glad that I've given it the time, because it definitely wouldn't have been what it is now if I had jumped into making this film, 6 months after Blue.
yeah,
It wouldn't be as, I guess, delicate, I don't think. And I think I needed the time to develop as a person and
yeah.
just experience life as well. I think there's a lot of pressure on young creatives and artists to, yeah, again, churn things out, and keep your
Yeah.
name kind of being pushed and pushed and pushed. Um, but then you haven't really given yourself much time to just experience life itself, and
Yeah.
to absorb being young and let it run through you, which will inevitably make the art better, I think.
I think there's such wisdom there because I mean, I feel that as a creator, as a songwriter, as a musical artist, like you do, if you're not releasing, you feel like you're not, you're not doing anything. And there is that kind of perceived pressure to kind of keep knocking stuff out. But what you've hit upon there is like so valuable because if you look at the kind of classic or the artists I view as classic, most importantly, I think they value their own voice and their own experience and the time it takes. And I think you get to that point as a creator to realize that actually doesn't matter how many posts you put out on social media or stuff. That stuff's like important, but like what's most important is that, like you say, you are developing as a voice. You're developing by taking in life experiences, and I think that's a very wise thing to say to any creator. Actually, that it's okay to take your time to make your art because, like you said, another 6 months sometimes, which might feel like you're not releasing, is like you're developing your voice, right? That's what you're saying there.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
That's a very wise thing to say. And so, but also in that, so you've been dipping your toes in different things. But as we know, this is like a kind of songwriting kind of podcast. But obviously, within that, we talk about music in different forms and creative industries. But you've been working quite closely and collaborating with a band, Die Twice, haven't you? That have been, working hard and they've been getting played on Radio One. So you've been working with them a lot too. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So I met the lead singer, Ollie, a long time ago when we were 15, maybe. And it's just one of those creative dynamics that has always been around, and we've always kind of shared our words and writings. And he built this band with all the other members, and I got brought in to take photos for them, and it's just set up a very nice dynamic with the team where I am the kind of go-to visuals person. I shot a music video for them in Paris for their single Paris, which was amazing. And yeah, it's just a really fun and harmonious kind of collaborative situation that I have, in a way, fallen into, for the better. And yeah, just
Yeah,
a
I mean,
nice.
you've fallen into it, but I think as well, like obviously have a bit of an insight. You're quite committed to kind of, creating visuals for a band, haven't you? You've been quite committed. That's been a thing that you kind of wanted to do. And
Yeah.
do you think that, I mean, you've also like your live work, photography work is very, very good. And something I've always thought about is if you're, watching a band play live, there's so many pictures of like, they become quite generic in a way, live band photography, because it's like band on stage with lights playing an instrument. It's like,
Mm.
it's all good. Your work and some of the great works is like when you capture a moment on stage, which is quite hard to do. Like, when, are those kind of just, are you looking for that particular moment when you take photos, or is it like just kind of spontaneous and you've taken enough photos to find that? Are you seeking out a kind of a moment?
I I actually like to shoot when I'm doing live gig photography. I like to turn my viewfinder off, so I'm not checking my photos as I go. I
Cool.
just shoot,
Yeah.
shoot, 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 as if I was shooting with film. So I'm not checking what I'm doing. I'm just kind of, yeah, I'm very much um, present in the moment. I like to get down on the floor and yeah, I mean, definitely soak up the atmosphere of the crowd, and
Yeah.
it's good to kind of sit for a moment and watch the band and observe who is interacting with who and how the dynamic works on stage,
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
see kind of points where there will be a good interaction, like
Yeah.
Billy and Finn in Die Twice. They always come together at one point, or well, a few times throughout the show, so you're going to have some nice intimate moments there if you just kind of observe
Yeah.
the way that the band perform for a song or two.
Yeah. Yeah.
um but yeah, I mean, I don't think I look for the moment. I think I do just, you have to just kind of keep shooting. And there is a element of kind of, I guess, magic to that, where you're just kind of, in a way, fingers crossed,
Yeah.
that something is sparky and you capture it.
You raised a couple of things there, observation and also dynamic in relationship. And obviously, by being a dad, I get to kind of to hear and read your work before others. But it's, I think, in Blue as well, your first film, observation and dynamic of relationships are quite important. Is that true in Pomegranate Seeds? And is that true that those are two things that are true for you as an artist?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you can't. I don't think any artist can ignore that. I think it's fundamental to pretty much every art form, actually, in a way. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I would agree with what you said. Yeah.
Give us a little insight into Pomegranate Seeds. This is your new film. So, in a sense, like we have an Indiegogo campaign, you have an Indiegogo campaign set up under the name Dorothea Forrester Pomegranate Seeds, and you're raising money, working with some great new filmmakers and offering lots of beautiful perks to make this film a reality. So, any listeners out there, please go and check it out because Dorothea talks really well in that Indiegogo campaign. You get to read about this. But what is this film about? And what inspired you to write this new film?
Pomegranate Seeds is an intimate human drama that is both joyful and hopeless. It follows the story of two best friends in their early 20s, Lola and Francis, as they go on a 4-day retreat with the hopes of making a film together. As the days go by, they naively tackle their fears, love, differences, and dependence. And yeah, it's kind of a story on growing up with someone and entering adulthood together, and being very overwhelmed by the world in which they find themselves and the feelings they have towards the world that they're in and each other, and just a messy coming of age story in a way. But it definitely translates through all ages. I think it's a feeling that everyone can understand when you're kind of, you're in your first year of being in your 20s, and yeah, you're kind of lost and confused, and you feel like I sound right now.
You don't
And
sound lost at all.
um, yeah, it's a big talk piece. Um, yeah.
I love that phrase you just said, joyful and hopeless. I mean, what a great title for an album that is. Like, it's beautiful. So was that like kind of so I mean like it, in Blue, for example, one of the and if you haven't seen this film, listeners, Blue, go and check it out. But one of the things that really was almost funny from the feedback that came across, and this is the film that you won Cannes World Film Festival Young Filmmaker Award for, was actually a demographic of like men in their like 50s and 60s were so emotional, weren't they, about the film?
Mhm.
And like you said, that's the kind of the feeling lost or needing to return back to the feeling of life affirming or what life's about. You'd managed to hit that really well. Was that a surprise that that kind of feedback came from that particular demographic?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely didn't see that coming. I mean, for because I did that whilst I was at school, and I remember writing up my kind of report on who I think this is gonna, you know, appeal to, and my ideas were just women or young women. So then to have the complete opposite was really, I mean, great. It was kind of exactly what I would want in a way. To be able to touch demographic that I mean, you don't often, I mean, I don't come across art, I guess, that I know touches people in that demographic. So it was interesting to me to find out that that did, because I guess, I mean, I am a young woman, so in a way the art that I hear about and the art I consume is what's affecting people around me.
Yes.
So I just, I didn't see that coming, but it was great that it did have that impact.
Well, I think I mean, as a writer, you tap into like a universe. It's that thing of personal and universal is quite a big thing. I mean, John Lennon, for example, is very good at doing personal and universal, and that's true in your writing and true in Pomegranate Seeds. I've managed to have the pleasure of reading it before it's been made, but also true of Blue as well. So, you've mentioned a couple of times now that your work's quite personal and honest. Um, how do you balance the kind of hiding of the personal and then being honest and also being universal? Is that a dance that you kind of think about when you're writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you have to start off personal to begin with. If you go universal to begin with, I don't think you can really get to a niche level of emotions, I guess. I think the nicheness and the kind of the dagger point, I guess, that gets people is tiny micro memories or micro emotions that maybe are kind of overlooked that get brought out. So it's kind of just kind of digging through your own personal life for a little golden nugget that you think, yeah, that'll transfer to more people than just myself.
That's,
So
that's interesting. That like dagger point moment of like recognizing like when a moment might transfer from beyond your own personal to like universal. That's quite an interesting idea. That because I suppose I have as a songwriter, I have that where like I hit a hook or a riff, and it's like I know that that will transfer. It's kind of and I don't know why it will transfer, but it's interesting to hear you talk like that. You kind of you get to that point and go, this will transfer. That's very
and
interesting.
I think humans are more similar than we like to think, if that makes sense. I think we're all much more, similar than we maybe perceive each other sometimes.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
Because I mean, in a way, if you look at I like to think about the Beatles in terms of songs, and just talking. It's just people and relationships, and again, observation, like what you said earlier about relationships and observing things, and if that's important to me, I think it's just what speaks to people.
Just go back to that for a second. Like you like to think in Beatles in terms of songs. Like, tell me about that.
Just in the way that, I mean, they have a great range in terms of how they speak to so many people,
Yeah,
but also their songs have such range to them as well,
yeah,
which I guess links back to me saying that humans aren't that different from one another. It's
yeah.
the sense that, you can really enjoy Sergeant Pepper's, but then you also really enjoy the White Album. But it's like they're all so different, but
It's
they
just,
all universally speak the same language to people.
and also importantly, it's coming from the same voice or voices, isn't it? It's like you can be a creator and create across. You can be a versatile creator, can't you? You can create like a intimate, honest, joyful, sort of hopeless thing, but then you could also do something totally different. Which is
Yeah, which is also inspiring. I think for me as well, I can feel quite nervous that I'm putting myself into a box with what I'm making.
yeah,
But I guess when you look at the Beatles again, it's, they have moved through so many different boxes
yeah.
and it's worked for them. So
Interesting what you're saying there about these sort of because it is a thing, like if you're a songwriter or an actor or well, not an actor actually. Let's just clarify this. If you're a songwriter or a writer, if you create original content, whether you're a painter, a writer, a songwriter, a director, you are in essence creating for yourself, and then you are putting it into the world. And there is some anxiety based in that because as much as one can say, I don't care what anyone thinks, if you're creating work which is honest, there is anxiety there, and there is a kind of I think it's bold to actually just accept that and own that. Like that, the release part of thing is can be a bit anxious time. But I
Yeah.
heard Tom York say something recently where he was really, really like totally um anxious about revealing some of his himself and his honesty. And then at a certain point, he realized that was actually what people wanted and responded to, and then he was able to own it in a different way.
I
And I
think
think
the weirder you let yourself be as well, and not even weird in a way that is kind of a bad thing. I mean, just kind of weird and raw and emotional and honest, the more success you will have as well. And I think people can sniff out when you're not being that.
definitely.
And also, if you're not being completely raw and weird and honest, I don't think your art will have a kind of niche place to go and sit, if that makes sense.
Totally,
Like,
totally.
people won't have extreme feelings towards it because you're not being extreme in yourself.
That's very true,
You
actually.
need to be extreme in yourself and to be
Yeah.
extreme in the way you express yourself for people to feel so strongly about what you're doing.
And also, it's worth saying to listeners out there, if you're not creators, if you're being weird and raw and honest and extreme, and that's just part of your head. It's not who you are the whole time as well. It's like it's just it's allowing yourself to go there, isn't it? And
Yeah.
that's really
And I
important.
also heard a quote that was quite soothing for me, is that I forgot, I don't know who said it. I heard it the other day, but um art is for the artist.
Nice.
And yeah, I mean, that kind of just brings a peace to the whole feeling of releasing stuff and
That's a good
putting
point.
it out there, that it is, you're doing it for yourself. So
Yeah, I spoke to someone about that the other day, actually, a friend who's just making art, making hobby art, craft art, and they were a bit concerned that it wasn't being purchased or people weren't responding. And I made the same point, which is like, you're making this for you. You know, whatever happens afterwards, you have. I had a quote recently by someone saying, "You have no control at all about how many people are going to watch or listen, how many people are going to purchase it, love it. You have no control over that, and so you can put it into the places where people might have more chance of seeing it or listening to it. But at that point, your work is done, really, and
yeah,
on to the next piece.
yeah, I think you've got to work with a confidence, that
Yeah,
it might sound strange, but you've got to work with a confidence that, for the sake of yourself enjoying it as well, that you
definitely.
think kind of, I'm making this, and in a few years when I'm in the grave, they'll understand it. If that makes sense, because it does
That's,
make it much more fun. I like, it's a fun game I like to play in my head, where if I'm writing, I'm just like, they'll get it one day. They'll get it one
that's
day.
so cool. I love that. That's so cool. But also, like, it's important, I think, is like what you're doing in the sense, and definitely for me as a songwriter. I mean, it's easier as a songwriter because they're just 3 minute songs. So it's not as much work as what you're doing, but you make statements, right? This is what you do as an artist. Like Blue is a statement. In a way, your work of Die Twice is a statement. Pomegranate Seeds is a statement, and then you move on to the next statement, and these things become bookmarks on the way, don't they? It's important to release. I know so many people who want to release and don't release because of the fear of what that release would mean or how they'd be defined by it. But actually, it's much more important to just keep on creating work, I think. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's taken me a while to get to that point. I think I have been very much. I guess that's why I also took such a long break between Blue and making this film.
Mm.
Is that I
It's only 2 years, by the way. It's only about 2 or 3 years. It's
feels
not.
like a long time to
Yeah,
me,
sure.
but yeah, yeah. I mean, it's So I had a brain fart.
It's okay. Fart away.
Um, yeah, I mean, you've got to kind of just close your eyes and click go in a way.
Yeah,
I mean, which I've only just reached a point of feeling cool about it.
that's cool.
Um, because I guess, especially when you're doing something like the crowdfunder and stuff like that, you have to just be. It's very vulnerable,
Very vulnerable.
and weird,
Yeah,
and you're pouring your whole soul out, but also asking for help and finance,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
a weird situation to be in. So I think doing this has also helped me kind of just accept the kind of click post, get it out there.
yeah,
I've made it, and then kind of turning my back on it a little bit in a way,
yeah, 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 yeah.
just to kind of let it exist out there and do its thing
It's yeah,
and
yeah.
keep moving.
Keep
you know.
moving, keep moving, keep moving. You hit an interesting point there because I mean, one of those things is like just for listeners out there who maybe aren't creators or people who crowdfunding is a very vulnerable thing to do because, like Dot just said, you kind of Dorothea just said, you're kind of making art which is vulnerable, but you're asking for help, and that's it's not an easy thing. It's never easy to ask for help on anything in life. But one thing to make clear to listeners when you go to help create, when you help a filmmaker or songwriter or anyone make some art because they need some funding, you are doing such a massive service and such a great
Mm.
thing because it's unfortunately we live in a world which is very expensive and art does not unless it's a big hit doesn't return quite in the same way, so these things become labors of love, and that's just the reality of the kind of way creators make money anymore. So anyone listening, if you have crowdfunded, and hopefully you will do for Dorothea's film Pomegranate Seeds, you are doing a massive service. So if you can help donate, please do, and please go and check out her Indiegogo page. um, I'm going to ask you some more questions, if that's okay with you, young lady.
Okay,
I'd like to
fire
know
away.
one question that I've asked a lot of female songwriters who I've had on the podcast, but also it's something I became aware of, running lots of events and open mics where female performers would be going into very male-dominated environments, and pubs, bars, and not that they wouldn't be met with any kind of um, aggression or kind of you're not welcome here stuff, but like it is a thing I think that needs to be highlighted. And I'd be interested to know your experience as a young female filmmaker, whether you have any kind of intimidation or whether it's difficult, or maybe it isn't actually at all anymore, to be a female creator in the kind of what has been quite a male dominated industry. Do you feel any of that, or is that just not a thing that's true for you?
I haven't I mean, when I was studying film, I guess you always have the kind of the film bros, they call them,
Yeah.
that are very kind of acknowledged in a way, but kind of like to put a bit of shame on you if you don't understand the references, which is very kind of,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have experienced that.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I don't want to stereotype it. It does
Right.
tend to be guys, but that was one experience, I guess. In terms of actually working on things, I haven't really come across any problems as of yet. I think you step into a way of moving through
Okay.
your art and moving through creating, which is maybe a more masculine presence that you step into, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like you need to kind of just have this masculine force to you to
Yeah.
kind of get it done and to direct and organize, and
Yeah.
you can't kind of, I mean, this again sounds very stereotypy, but because I'm not saying that feminine energy is floaty, because feminine energy is also very strong, but I guess you kind of, I don't know how to explain it
I
very
think I
well.
get, I
You
think I
just kind
get
of
a grasp.
step into
No, I
this.
get a grasp of what you're saying. I think it's like you're right that actually, I mean, the female energy is like capable of much at times, much more organization or kind of dealing with
Yeah, yeah,
situations. Because I mean, it's just biologically true. But but I think in a sense, what I think you might be hinting at, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it like maybe the action based kind of energy, the kind of which is maybe more male. I suppose is that what you're saying? That
yeah, and
yeah,
also just having strength and consistency, which is quite hard not to get all
yeah,
woman and feminist about it, but like the monthly cycle is a rocky road
it's a reality.
sometimes,
It's a
and
reality.
to try and be
Yeah.
doing this for like a consistent production when your hormones are just going woo 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 woo.
Well, to be fair,
It's
like the whole of modern society is a patriarchy which is not set up to help or or to be fair to this sort of female biological system. So
no, which I think it translates to many industries where the
yeah,
women just have to kind of fight through their pain that they're feeling, or
yeah,
just to exist. There's a lot going on
harder.
below the
Yeah,
surface just to
yeah,
kind of get through a day,
yeah,
at times.
yeah, of
But I
course.
do think, in terms of photography, it's helped me in a way to be a woman, if that
Okay,
makes sense.
okay, tell me about that.
Um, I think I think people react very well to female energy behind the camera. I think it's like
Mm.
comforting, and I've always had good response from people when I'm doing shoots with them, that they feel very comfortable and happy to kind of express and be themselves, and they don't feel kind of watched like a hawk, if that makes sense, which I think has helped me in that department.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that as well, there's like an element to like, I suppose I mean, you grew up with bands around all the time, didn't you? So like, do you think there's kind of a comfort in that, in sort of being around that and not being sort of fangirl, or, you kind of actually see the reality of it too?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely find a lot of comfort in it because it's something I'm very used to, and the dynamics are something I'm very used to.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of fun hanging out with the bands. Yeah.
So, this meeting is going to end in 4 minutes, but I'm saying I'm going to start another meeting up because this is an interesting conversation. If we can keep on going,
Okay.
that'd be great because I've got
Yeah.
some more questions I'd like to ask you. Just in terms of like, who are your influences as a creative?
Mm, as a fit, I
As an
mean, it
artist?
depends on each. Okay. I'm a big Jack Kerouac fan.
Yeah.
I'm a big Henry Miller fan, which is a bit controversial at times. Luca Guadagnino in terms of film directors. He did a film called Call Me by Your Name, which is, I think about daily.
Okay.
And Wim Wenders, who did Paris, Texas,
Yep.
which is another one that I think about daily. Woody Allen, Eric Romer,
Yeah.
and then musically, there's loads of people. Chet Baker,
Mm.
the Beatles. I mean, the list goes on. um, Bret Easton Ellis.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
just, I mean,
they're quite kind of so we'll come on to music in part two a bit more actually, but like those influences you've listed, they're quite in some ways they're quite extreme figures, aren't they? In some ways, I mean, they're very like or they're strong,
yeah,
but they're strong voices.
yeah. I mean, I think in terms of my film influences, there's more of a softness,
Yeah.
with Luca Guadagnino and with Wim Wenders and with Eric Romer,
Yeah.
even with Woody Allen as well. I think it's more gentle and has more of a kind of, I think that's those inspire my movies. And
Yes.
then in terms of the authors that I've listed, I
Yes.
think that inspires the way that I write
Yes.
prose.
Yeah.
Because those authors are very masculine and sometimes quite sexist at times and controversial. Which, I mean, the boldness is what intrigues me.
Yes.
But I would say I write that way in prose, but I don't really write that way with my scripts and my films.
Yeah.
With my scripts and my films, I'm much more in touch with the gentle, and with the kind of a more like a melancholy and a softer sides.
I agree. I agree. We're going to take a slight pause because this Zoom meeting is just like running out of time, but we're going to come back for part two in a second and carry on this conversation if that's cool with you, Dorothea.
Yeah.
So we spoke a little bit there about kind of film influences as well, and obviously a lot of listeners here to this podcast are music fans. So I know you're a big music fan. So in terms of like, I want to talk to you a little bit about musical influences in terms of thinking about pomegranate seeds. Tell me a bit about that. Did you listen to music as you wrote it? Did you have music in mind that you'd like in it, or how did music impact your creation with pomegranate seeds?
When I was writing it, I had a playlist that I was just happened to be listening to, which was kind of Henry Mancini, old Hollywood strings, George Gershwin, Piero Piccioni, all these kind of Italian and old American Hollywood kind of scores that I was listening to whilst I was thinking about the film and starting to write it. So I definitely think the soundtrack shaped the film and
Yeah.
then the film also shaped the soundtrack. It's kind of a
Yeah.
they both feed each other for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think if I was listening to a different soundtrack whilst writing it, it would have been a different
Yeah.
movie as well.
Yeah. 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 That's really interesting. So, like, the kind of, in the sense, you as a writer, do you think like do you listen to music as you write?
Yeah, always. I mean, in a way, I mean, probably more so when I'm brainstorming,
Yeah.
and just kind of, brain dumping all my ideas for something. Sometimes silence is ideal for writing, but
Yeah.
when I'm first thinking up an idea, and then also with directing, when I start to think about visuals and how it will look, I guess there's always I mean, music is a huge part of movie making.
Yeah.
If you were to watch a movie without music, I'm sure there's very few that would hit quite the same.
I think it's the ultimate point, actually. I think as a creative myself, I think the point of being in a cinema where you are sitting there and there's nothing else going on and you surrendered entirety to the film, and then music comes in at that point to punctuate a message or to soundtrack a moment. I think that's probably the most powerful moment as a receiver of art or audience member you can have. I think that moving image with music is probably the most powerful point.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the tearjerker moment. I think is when the music sets in after a certain line. For sure,
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
very crucial to creating a punch, I think.
People are going to ask and have asked, actually, because I've spoken a few people saying that I'm having you on the podcast. Did you ever want to go into being a music creator yourself or songwriter yourself, bearing in mind that both your parents were songwriters? And
When I was 10, I wanted to be a drummer.
you were a good drummer as well.
I mean, yeah, that was short lived. And then I think I went through a little period when I was 14 or 15. I'm sure you remember, where I started playing the electric guitar a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
I learned Dear Prudence on guitar, and then I was thinking that I could do the songwriter thing, but it just doesn't come to my brain very naturally, which is
Mm.
strange in terms of I just don't know how. I can't fathom how people put together how I don't know how sounds and how tiny little details come into play in terms of sculpting a song. I think in terms of writing songs, maybe I could do it,
Yeah, yeah.
but also poetry isn't really my strong point. I don't think, um, and I think to write a good song, you have to be somewhat kind of maybe more. I don't know.
It's really interesting talking to you about it because the thing is, it's like for me, like the idea of writing a screenplay or scripts or making a film or novel, like now and again, I'll be like, oh, I can do that. And I'll attempt to do it, but I'm so overwhelmed by like the magnitude of how much work there is to that and how committed you have to be to this one thing. So for me, for example, the way my brain works is like song, next song. So it's like it's much easier for me
Mm,
to kind of create like that. But the one thing I would say is like, as a songwriter myself, is like a lot of my influences are like more to do with like film or more to do with reading than they are necessarily to do with actual listening to music. And it's very interesting to hear how a filmmaker, and often this is said with filmmakers, that it's actually Scorsese, for example, with the Rolling Stones, is like how often filmmakers will actually rely upon music or use music to create with.
yeah, yeah. There's definitely I think all art feeds
Yes.
each other in a way. Like I went on a bit of a fangirl about the 1920s, 1930s Paris,
Yeah.
and how all the writers were hanging out with the painters and how they were both kind of feeding each other. And there was a Henry Miller interview where he was just talking about, the importance of hanging out with painters. And I think Picasso said how important it is for him to hang out with writers because he can't stand to be around the painters because he
Yeah.
needs to be fed by a different art form.
That's
Um,
really interesting. That is because I mean, for me, like for example, like I people talking to me about guitars or what type of instrument, like I just can't go there. So like I need to be around a different sort of influences. Is that important? I mean, you is it important to you to have like a nucleus of people around you. You've spoken about Die Twice, for example, and there's obviously filmmakers you're working with on this film. Is it important to you to have close relationships or relationships with people that also create art?
Mm, I don't know if it's so much people that create art. I think there's it's just I mean just people that I I think people that have an interest in it, I suppose, is the important part. It's not so much that they need to be creating it,
Okay.
but there's like an active interest, because I think also sometimes when you're too involved with loads of people that are all creating it, it can create quite a unbalanced environment.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much if you were all doing different, if it was a writer, a painter, a photographer, and a shoemaker all hanging out. I think that's kind of cool. I think you can all feed each other. But if you have just this huge gaggle of just writers or just film directors, I think it can get a bit I don't know, maybe just less harmonious.
Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe just lacking in kind of variation in a
Yeah.
way. So I think it's more just seeking people that are varied in the way that they live their lives and the way that they view the world,
Yeah.
more so than them being kind of creators or artists themselves. Maybe
Okay. That's a good.
just being good perceivers of the world is what's important to me.
That's really nice. You've worked with food a lot as well, as of course is another creative environment. Um,
Mm.
and certainly Blue was your first film, contained quite a lot of food, but the title Pomegranate Seeds again is kind of reference to food and nutrition and things like that. I'm not at all suggesting that food is important to you as a kind of you don't write about food, but there's that you have expressed some of that. Is that also like an area which is of interest to you as a kind of creator too? I know you've worked in that industry, but is that something which transfers as well? The creative process of cooking something, making something, is that important or not at all?
Mm, I don't. I mean, I think food is definitely an art form, and I think when it's done well, it's kind of like painting a picture in a way,
Yes.
onto a plate, which is nice. I don't think it really feeds into the stuff that I make now so much, but I guess it's always in the back of my head slightly because it was such a big part of my life for a while.
Yeah.
Um, but I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. I wouldn't say it kind of inspires me, but I guess there's
I
also
mean,
there's a work ethic also to the
yeah, kind of,
hospitality
yeah.
food industry.
I was going to say,
Um,
yeah, because I think you, something which I think is quite important you raised earlier actually about being, growing up in an artistic household is like graft is really important. And one of the things I think probably has been quite interesting and in your story and may play out in ways like you have worked with many men in very pressured environments of creation with time factors and things like that. So that might be something which is quite an interesting thing to have gone through and might play out. Do you think?
mm. um, yeah, I mean, I think I went to culinary school for a year,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, I mean, in a way, yeah, that definitely. I would say of all the industries I've put my feelers out into, that
Yeah.
was the one that was the most kind of okay, okay, guys, let's chill out on the kind of masculinity thing we've got going on here. Just yeah, I mean, it definitely builds a tough skin for you as well. So then when you move from hospitality into working in
Yeah.
film or working in an artistic pursuit and you're working with artistic people, no, it doesn't really seem like much of an obstacle, or people don't
No.
seem like much of an obstacle, because
Yeah.
so often in hospitality it's very dramatic people sometimes over a piece of dinner, which is you kind of you've seen some pretty grim situations as well.
Yeah.
And in a way it's like, okay, well, a few days ago I was cleaning milk sediments and mixed in with coffee grains off the floor,
Yeah.
and then you go and work on a film and it's like, this is this is great fun. I'm having a good time. Nothing to complain about here.
Well, it's a counterpoint.
Um,
I think it's important actually sometimes to just remember that counterpoint because obviously, you are going through. I was thinking about this earlier actually. That sometimes as a creator or an artist, you don't know the moment you're in, and there's a bit of a buzz that you're kind of in at the moment. Stuff going on behind the scenes as well, and the creation of a new piece is obviously very exciting, and it's thrilling to kind of see you have worked so hard and be and to commit to a project and to commit to that coming to being. Are you like aware of the buzz and aware of the state and time and creation process you're in right now, or is it just so busy and active that you just kind of have to crack on?
um, Slightly, yeah. I mean, in a way, it's just kind of cracking on.
Yeah,
Um, and I think I do have a thing where I don't really think I fully recognize it until I'm past it,
yeah, yeah,
which I'm actually kind of okay with in a way as well. Um,
yeah,
because I would say that nostalgia is a big influence for me anyway. So in a way, it serves me that I kind of feel the most about things when I'm reminiscing on them.
yeah. That's a great thing.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So on your page, I've read recently you've committed to make this into a black and white film. Is that true?
Yes.
And tell me about the kind of decision to do that.
Um, well, many of the kind of inspirations for the film have been shot in white. So Woody Allen's Manhattan,
Yeah,
and a lot of Hollywood classics such as In a Lonely Place, Casablanca, um, as well as Malcolm and Marie,
yeah,
which is a recent film. They were all shot in black and white, and I think what I like about it is it aids to the simplicity of the piece.
mm,
The piece is based mostly in one location, and it's focused upon the conversations between two people solely,
yeah,
um, which is, I kind of like. I like in a way that nothing is black and white with them as well.
mm,
Um, and I don't know. I wanted to feel stripped back and allow for there to be space for the words to take over and for the faces to speak the
mm,
loudest. I suppose I didn't want to have any kind of distractions
yeah.
from the words and the conversations and the eyes in a way. I
Mm.
just wanted to, you know, give space to what these people have to say.
Love that. I love that. When and how do you write? What's the
When
kind
and
of
how.
scene? What's the kind of yeah? What's the kind of I ask songwriters this is like, do they have a habit for writing? Many people do or don't. For me, for example, it's just like it's very spontaneous. If I sit down to write, it's generally just mechanical and me just sort of repeating something I've done before or generic. If so, I tend to have a relationship where I'm waiting for something to hit and then I'll do
Mm.
it. So other writers will sit down, like Roald Dahl, for example, would write 1 hour a day, or different songwriters will give themselves 2 hours or two songs a month, or then we'll write every day. How is when you're writing something, when do you do it and how do you do it? What's the scene, the atmosphere? When do you kind of decide to do that? Is it going on all the time, or is it specifically a kind of
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always it's always running around through my head. So I'll have a notebook where I just write down the lines that come into my head, and quite often I will, if I when writing pomegranate seeds for the journey between blue and pomegranate seeds, there would just be lines that would come into my head when
yeah?
thinking about certain things that I'd write down, and then I put it all into a folder,
Oh,
and then
cool.
I'll go through the folder and look at all the different lines that I have got, and then kind of structure it and then build upon it, if that makes sense.
That's great.
So it's kind of like the characters just speak at me, and then I get it down and I come back to it later. In terms of when I'm actually doing the body of the work and having to get the whole script down, or kind of just the body of anything, I mean, I tend to just sit down, typically on the floor. I've noticed as well, is that the floor is where I am the most productive, which is strange,
Yeah, no, I
but
get that. I
but it
get
works for me. So I wrote pomegranate seeds on the floor, and I think I wrote blue on the floor,
brilliant.
and also editing things on the floor. Like it does the floor, it does something for me.
You know,
Um,
I feel the same way about a floor, actually.
and then yeah, I mean, if I want to be inspired as well, I will turn to music and put on a certain playlist. I'll tend to kind of choose what I want to work on, and then I'll play the music that I think inspires what I want to work on, and then I'll just let myself feel emotions and write about it. So then that's another process when I'm feeling a kind of topic out a bit and I'm kind
Yeah.
of seeing where I can go with it. I'll just be sat listening to songs and then crying and then being happy and then feeling, just letting myself feel, which is quite a
Letting yourself feel. What a great,
animal situation.
that's a very good piece of advice. That is letting yourself feel. I mean, that's so important to any creator, because the world's set up to kind of minimize or hide feelings, and it's you can't always live life in feelings, but allowing yourself to feel is very important.
Mm.
Do you have like the other films in mind? Yeah, I mean, you're concentrating on this at the moment, but do you have like next projects in mind and other folders, themes that you're looking to work on or that you do work on whilst you're...
Yes, I have a few. I have a feature film idea that I am slowly building in a folder.
Great.
Which will, yeah, I won't give too much away because I'm feeling it out. But there's a feature film coming, and also a feature documentary coming, which is based around horses, which is something I didn't think I'd be doing, but has been brought to me by a lovely woman called Sally. And I'm very excited about that. And then also a novel, which is always kind of in the works and in the back of my head. Um, yeah.
Beautiful. This idea of you like writing, starring, and directing and something. So, is that you did it with Blue and you were going to do it with Pomegranate Seeds? Is this something which is like you might carry on through your career, do you think?
I'd like to. Yeah. I mean, if it works out well, then ideally that would be a good setup.
Super cool.
Yeah, it would be cool.
It's super, super cool. When in terms of like so this is a question I asked like lots of songwriters. I asked them the question which is like what song would they wish they could have written by somebody else? Obviously you're not a songwriter, but I'm going to ask you if you could include a song in your film as a soundtrack or that moment at the end when the credits roll, what song would you love to have in your film?
Um, I have for pomegranate seeds. I would say bookends
Yeah,
theme,
yeah,
Simon and Garfunkel.
yeah.
Um, and then for the feature film, I have in mind Stardust, which is Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra.
Brilliant.
Um, yeah, those two.
Talking about bookends is a song. Such a beautiful song, and it talks about kind of dynamic between friends and things like that. So this pomegranate seeds is the concept of Lola and Francis, who are kind of old childhood friends, and they're sort of growing up and working life out and revealing things to each other. So in a sense, there's a kind of like a bit of a muse relationship maybe between the two of them. I'd like to know about your relationship. This is a question I ask lots of songwriters about your relationship with the concept of the muse. Do you believe in the muse? How does it show up for you? Do you think it's like a universal creative force? Do you think it's just life as it happens, or people, or like, who is and what is, or what is your relationship with the muse, and what do you think it is?
Um, I mean, I definitely think it's a personal thing always, and it's kind of life and what life offers you and the people it offers you.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I think it all comes. I mean, for me personally, I think it all comes from within myself and the way that I perceive things and the way that I maybe wish things to be. Or
Hmm.
I don't think I. I mean, I think nostalgia is a big muse for me,
Yeah.
and youth and kind of words left unsaid and the ways things could have gone and the ways things have gone and
Hmm.
um like kind of missing something that I never had sometimes, and then sometimes missing something that I did have. It's always kind of looking back, I think, for me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that's just experience, like that's just the way that I've perceived experiences. And I think also with artists that have muses in human forms, for example, you know, when people have lovers that are their muse.
Yeah.
I do think it comes back to just the way that the artist perceives the world.
Yes.
So in a way, I kind of believe that every artist is their own muse in a way, because it's always within their head and how they perceive things.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But I think also just reaching for this kind of greater thing, or for life to feel greater and larger, and to feel this kind of firework thing. So it's always kind of, I think that's what people are reaching for when they reach for the muse as well, is to have, you know, a hold of this spark or kind of dream state thing that maybe doesn't exist on the day to day, which I guess is what art provides as well, is that you can kind of escape into that thing.
Yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
guess art is the kind of the capturing of the muse, which is this desire to feel on a greater scale.
I think that's so beautiful what you just said there. I'm going to use that as a quote for this podcast. That's so well eloquently put. Wish you
Thank you.
I'm a writer. So coming towards the end of this podcast, let me just refer people again to the Indiegogo page. You want to look up Dorothea Forrester and the film Pomegranate Seeds, and Dorothea has a list of different perks, and she goes into some depth there, talking to camera about her film and how it's been made. And please do go and have a read of it, check it out, see the different perk levels, and if you can donate in any way to help Dorothea create this film, we would be very, very grateful for that. But in your own words, just tell people where they can find you online and where you send them in your direction.
I am on Instagram at Dorothea Forrester. Same with YouTube, and the Indiegogo, I think, will be linked somewhere with the podcast.
Yes.
And that is kind of the only places that I am online at the moment. So Instagram and YouTube, Dorothea Forrester.
Brilliant. And they can also check out your Die Twice music video from there as well. And there's some of the live photography as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, you know, obviously as your dad, and I'm talking in the we there, I wish you all the best for this project, but also it's been absolutely fascinating just to talk to you and listen to you talk about you being an artist and creative and how music influences. And, you know, I'm sure all the listeners here would be really grateful to listen to you speak and also be inspired to hear you speak as well. So thank you so much for being part of the podcast. And we look forward to seeing Pomegranate Seeds and to everything else that you go on to create.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure, darling.
Lovely.
Lovely. All right.
And thank you to anyone that checks out my page.
Yeah, do. You won't be disappointed. Like I said to people, well, I said on the podcast earlier, I read this screenplay, and obviously, as a dad, one always thinks one's child is brilliant. But I have to say, as a writer, and this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever read, and I don't say that lightly. It is extremely beautiful, powerful material, and you know, I'm a big fan of like people like Herman Hesse as a writer, and Dorothy's writing at times in the screenplay like literally took my breath away and kind of reminded me of like life really in a way which is very unique and very beautiful. So I would advise people to go and check out her work immediately. So thank you for listening to this podcast, people that are listening. And Dorothea, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your head and your thoughts with us all.
Thank you.
Nice one, baby. That's it done.
Sweet.